Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another edition of To The Point podcast. Hope you guys are all doing well on this snowy morning in mid-April, which is just crazy to think about, but life goes on, I guess, and hopefully this is our last little storm of the season before we get some warm weather ahead here in New Brunswick. But before we get into the sports and a couple key items from last night, I just want to start off today by just saying thank you to everybody that's reached out to me, that's watched the interview that I had with Doug MacLean yesterday. If you haven't seen it, it's on Facebook. It's going to be on the YouTube, To The Point YouTube channel this afternoon. So I'm going to have that on there after recording this. And I'm so thankful for everybody that did watch, that has reached out to me, that enjoyed it. I know, just speaking myself, just thinking to myself, it was so fun yesterday to interview Doug. He was, you see a guy on TV and you think, well, what's this guy really going to be like? He was Doug MacLean, the guy you see on Hockey Central at noon, the no BS, the storytelling. And it was a thrill for me. I've had the opportunity in school to interview some cool people, and hopefully this first interview with Doug MacLean will only be the first of many that I get to do over the course of the next little while. But for Doug to accept an interview from me, he didn't know me. I just reached out hoping for the best, and for I told him after, but I really appreciate it. And for everybody that listens, that has given me feedback and has been a listener throughout, I appreciate everything from you guys, because I love hearing the feedback. I like hearing people's opinions on different takes that I have, or different interviews. But yesterday was just about hearing cool stories. When Doug said, I didn't think Steve Yzerman was a good captain. I mean, what a soundbite that was. Just to hear him say that was, who would have ever thought that? Hearing about the late Brian Murray, I was really interested in that, because I know they were so close, but also, I didn't know how long, and their age difference, and how long Brian Murray knew Doug before he eventually hired him as an assistant coach. That's so interesting for me. Again, I'm conducting the interview. I got to try to bring it different ways, but as I hope it was interesting for everybody, but it was so interesting for me because, I had to try to run the interview, but also, take in all the interesting information that Doug was saying. So it was an interesting balance, that's for sure. But great day yesterday, all in all, for everybody. I know on Facebook, over 800 people have viewed it, which is just incredible. And like I said, if you haven't, it's worth the watch for sure. Doug's incredible. Again, he's going to have a book coming out in October 2022, which is about the draft. So I love hearing those stories, behind the scenes. He talked about yesterday that he drafted Nikolai Zherdev. And if you don't recall Nikolai Zherdev, he was a Russian star that really had all the promise in the world to be a future potentially Hall of Famer. And, kind of drugs, alcohol, that party lifestyle kind of killed his career, similar to a Johnny Manziel, if you remember him in football. And it didn't turn out great for him. He had no okay career, but he kind of drank himself out of the league, so to speak. And, Columbus took Zherdev, and right after him was Thomas Vanek, which is so interesting to hear, the drafts and players, because Vanek kind of had a checkered career too, more success than Zherdev, longer longevity in the league, but he also had his issues. So just a fantastic interview. Again, thank you to everybody who listened and has supported me throughout, because again, you guys fuel me. I want to do this for a career, obviously. And, this is a great first step for me to get some cool experience, to have a super knowledgeable and interesting person on the podcast to talk about, life in sports, trades, things of that nature, behind this curtain type information that you don't get to hear every day. So I loved it, and I hope you guys did too. And hopefully I can get some more of these down the line. And if I do, you'll know, because I loved hearing from everybody over the past 24 hours. So thank you to everybody again, and hopefully we get some more of this down the line. Pivoting from such a great day for me personally, last night it was a tough news in the sports world. Obviously, over the past couple days, the sports world really came together when Derek Chauvin was found guilty of the murder of George Floyd. And that, I'm going to go into that for a second. It's not sports related, but it really became a sports topic. And to what really worried me about that situation, and I talked about it with my parents, because ever since, the pandemic, it's been a Black Lives Matter movement, and I've really gotten behind it. For a long time, I think I looked at life and said, I'm naive to this. And I finally looked in the mirror and said, am I a racist? No. Am I a bigot? No. But I can do more. Like, why don't we notice this as white people every day, that we have such privilege? Even for myself, I'm a straight white male. Who has more privilege than me? Nobody. And in this case, I was nervous that the jury was not going to do the right thing. And that's scary to me. That I fear that our judicial system is going to do the wrong thing. It should always be concrete. It should always do right. But you can correlate it to the O.J. Simpson trial, where you had half the world, white people, hoping for a guilty verdict. Then you had the other half of the world, the African Americans, hoping that he was found acquitted. And I think there's similar. Well, obviously, O.J. was a sports superstar, one of the best college football players to ever play. But what the differences, the similarity is just how big it was. George Floyd started a movement where we saw Black Lives Matter. O.J. Simpson, we saw the privilege in that case of an African American, but also an elite superstar get off of a murder case because of his notoriety. George Floyd was an unknown. He was like me, or he was like you, but now he's such a bigger figure. He's George Floyd, the man who maybe had to die for the greater good. And he should be living today. He should be walking the streets of Minneapolis, but he's not. And I struggle to celebrate it because, yes, I was more relieved than congratulatory that Chauvin went to jail, because he should go to jail. You shouldn't have to celebrate something that should happen. You should pay your taxes. You should not beat your wife. Simple. You should, normal things. You should take the garbage out. I don't see a difference here. And so, looking at the Chauvin trial and I see it as a sports story because of all the athletes that have spoken out. We saw protests from the NBA in the bubble, protests from the NHL, from the likes of Ryan Reeves and Evander Kane and the Black Diversity Alliance that was sparked from, Akeem Aliu, these guys that African-American hockey players and African, just Black Canadian hockey players that were just fed up. And so I see that as a positive from this. So that's a cool sports story. But another 16-year-old Black woman was killed the other night, shot 4 times after calling the police. These are all difficult cases to understand, but pivoting from such a great day for me yesterday, I still see such a disconnect with just life. And that concerns me, that I hope we're getting better. I know as a white person, I strive to get better every day with race relations, because it shouldn't be that difficult. It really isn't. But I think we make it out to be this difficult thing where life isn't black or white. It's unification. And I know I went on this crazy tangent here, but I just think it's important because it's such an important issue to me. We saw a guy like Colin Kaepernick who had an issue which was about police brutality, about police killing unarmed Black people. And the media and people spun it to make it look like it was a fight against the national anthem, which was never what he was trying to do. But to get people to see you, to hear you, you need to make it prevalent. He decided to take a knee. People hated it. They made it a divisive political issue, which I think was incorrect. He was trying to. One thing I can say is that when Chauvin was found guilty, George Floyd's never going to come back. But it did vindicate Colin Kaepernick, in my opinion, for noticing something that was happening in culture that nobody would have addressed. I'm going to make that clear. Kaepernick was taking a knee for police brutality. And for the people that say, well, he shouldn't have taken a knee, it's unpatriotic, who was doing anything about police brutality before that? It sparked something. And maybe he didn't get all the attention that he wanted, which a lot is to do with the media, because you saw sports shows and Good Morning America talk about, well, should he be taking a knee? Is it disrespectful to the national anthem? Not talking about the real issue, which is not uncommon because that's what media companies do. They're bad at their job. They're bad at actually telling you the real news of the day. Sorry. But I think it vindicated him because did he get the conversation going? Yes. And it took, what's so sad is it took George Floyd being killed, and thank, whatever you believe in, thank God, whatever whatever it is, that young woman took a video that day, because if she didn't, I don't think Derek Chauvin's in jail. George Floyd's death would be for nothing, because if you don't have video evidence, you're not. Unfortunately, you could be Black and be completely innocent. You're not going to get the benefit of the doubt, which is really a shame. But all that being said, last night was sad in the sports world again, because Terence Clark, a Kentucky freshman, as a guard, he had just declared for the NBA draft. He passed away in a fatal car accident. He was 19, and a excellent guard, looked like he had a promising future in the NBA, and to not even have the chance to get to the league is just so deflating for him. I feel terrible. I like to send condolences to the Clark family. Obviously his death is bigger than basketball, bigger than his potential career, but he was going to be a first round pick, a lottery pick. And to him, he didn't get to have the career that he was supposed to have. And that's obviously sad. And, this morning I realized I go from talking about the Derek Chauvin trial to this young man, Terence Clark, passing away. And know that the two aren't directly connected, but I just think the conversation, the unification, the acceptance, and seeing Black athletes speak out, have a platform, and really start to make a difference is only a positive thing. And, Terence Clark had just signed with Clutch Sports, which is the agency that LeBron James owns. I mean, this kid was going to be a star. You don't sign with Clutch before you get to the NBA unless you're going to be good. That's just how it works. But seeing LeBron James, his platform, what he's been able to do, I think of Stephen Curry. In the NFL, Richard Sherman he's in the NFLPA, but he speaks out against these issues. I mentioned Colin Kaepernick. I think we're starting, even in the past, Black athletes did not have the ability or the audience to speak out. Michael Jordan, yes, he was a huge athlete, but he was afraid to talk about certain issues. Again, it could have been back in the day, he said Republicans buy sneakers too, which made it a political issue. I just think with our free speech era that we're living in currently, and with African Americans, with white people, we got so many, Chinese people, so many different people living alongside each other. I just think it's nice to see that it's not just the white male athlete that has a voice anymore, and that we're starting to see some diversity come through and really start to make a difference in our society. Because hearing differing opinions is always good. And I again, I'm glad for the Chavin verdict. It should have happened, and hopefully there's no more killings. Obviously, you can't. There's going to be another case down the line, something bad that happens, but we gotta hope for the best, and that's all I'm saying today, is that hopefully we can be better in the years to come, and we don't have to hear any more stories about Breonna Taylor or George Floyd or Trayvon Martin, because they're cultural moments, but you don't want that to be a cultural moment where parents have to bury their child too young. So I go from an exciting day with Doug MacLean to that, but that's, if you've listened to this podcast before, I can spin things into a lot of different ways this morning. So happy Friday. The National Hockey League. Interesting as we get into the last stretch, last couple weeks, about three and a half weeks left in the NHL season. Still a lot to be decided because teams have been out with COVID, as you know. The Vancouver Canucks have just returned this week. The Colorado Avalanche returned to the ice last night. As of right now, there are no COVID outbreaks, but that's to be determined. You can't be confident that the rest of the year there won't be any issues, in my opinion, because we've seen it in the United States. We've seen multiple times in Canada, Vancouver, Montreal to shut down for a week. So all we can do is hope for the best right now, and hopefully athletes stay safe. But everybody's playing. Again, the full schedule of teams can play as of right now, and they got on the ice last night. A couple big games, a lot of big games on the schedule. And I thought I'd start going through each division today and talk about just really the intrigue and where this could head. And the big game, I'm going to start with the East Division. Big game in the East Division, Washington playing the Islanders. They start the night tied in points, tied for first in the East Division. And the Washington Capitals end up beating the Islanders 1-0 in the gimmick, or the shootout, if you will. Great game, back and forth. Solid goaltending from Samsonov and Semyon Varlamov. But Evgeny Kuznetsov eventually gets the shootout winner. Didn't watch that one. I saw that this morning because I don't watch the shootouts. It's not part of hockey. It's not in my wheelhouse. But Washington gets the win. They're now a point up. They're first in the division. Washington looks like a really strong team. Me and Craig talked about it under review. I think Washington is a Stanley Cup threat. Anthony Mantha, to his credit, I still think the trade is egregious, but it could be a short-term, really good move in that if Washington can win a cup this year, then who cares about a first or second round pick in the years to come, because you won the ultimate goal. You won the trophy. You got Mantha under contract. Alex Ovechkin is an unrestricted free agent after this season, which is an interesting little story because he doesn't have a contract. He's still scoring. He's still playing at a very high level. I assume he'll return, but he doesn't have a contract. You could head to free agency and see what's out there. But as of right now, the Washington Capitals are looking like a very strong team. And I like the one worry, but this is a worry across the league, really, to talk about this. Goaltending. I think it may be the weakest position in hockey right now. And for a long time, I thought it was defense, because I think there are more bad defensemen in the NHL than good ones. Honestly, if you got a really good defenseman, hang on to their ass. You got a Victor Hedman, you got a Seth Jones. Even teams now are we see this in Canadian markets, you hang on to number 2 defensemen like they're gold. Just a few examples. Morgan Riley. He's a number 2 or a number 3 defenseman. Again, Leafs fans, you might think the guy's Scott Niedermayer. He's a really good player. Again, you might think I bury him on this show, but he's not a number 1 defenseman. Number 1 defenseman can play 25 minutes a night. He can't. Josh Morrissey, he's a 2 or 3. Josh Morrissey. Again, Josh Morrissey is very similar to Morgan Riley. Morgan Riley's a better player, but Morrissey's a 2 or a 3 defenseman. He can play 22 minutes a night, but is he a number 1? No. And Winnipeg does not have a number 1 defenseman. Pionk and Morrissey are both 2-3s. You look at Riley, Muzzin, same thing. They're 2 to 4 defensemen in that range, and Brody would line up the same. So pivoting, Shabbat. I think he is a number 1 defenseman, but Ottawa doesn't have a choice. They force feed him into playing close to 30 minutes a night because they're a bad team and they don't have a lot of depth in that area. Calgary, Rasmus Anderson. Is he a number 1 defenseman? No, he's probably a 2-3. But again, teams are not going to depart. But you look at goaltending. Washington is a Stanley Cup contender. Could easily win it. But they got Samsonov, who has not played a playoff start in his career. Not even a second on the ice. And Vitek Vanacek in net, who also has not played a lick. Now, that does not mean they won't win the cup, because we've seen Matt Murray not have any playoff experience. He comes in the lineup, he catches fire, they win a cup. However, he did not, both his playoff runs, he had Marc-Andre Fleury, he had Casey DeSmith make starts, Jeff Zakhoff. So it was not him running the gauntlet, so to speak. But you look around the league. In this division, Washington, do they have a goalie that you trust heading into the playoffs? To me, no. Pittsburgh, no. I think Pittsburgh is a good team. Tristan Jarry, Casey DeSmith, no. I have no confidence in that. The Islanders. Varlamov, I do have some confidence, but they've been, in their last couple runs, they had Greiss and Varlamov. They have Varlamov and Sorokin now, who has not played a lick in the playoffs. We're seeing an influx of younger netminders. Again, the Craig Andersons, the Mike Smiths. These guys are transitioning out of the league. They're getting older. Ryan Miller. These guys are leaving the game. And it's going to happen where a youngster can catch fire and win a Stanley Cup in net. But it's just interesting. You look at Boston has Tuukka Rask. You'd obviously trust him. He's been to 2 Stanley Cup finals. Looking at the Canadian division, Toronto, they got 4 different goalies that they play. Do you trust any of them to win a cup? Well, Freddie's never won a playoff series. He's been there for 5 years. Jack Campbell, no. He's a backup goalie. David Riddick, same thing. Montreal, you should trust Carey Price. The guy can't stay healthy, and he's been really inconsistent all year. Edmonton, Mike Smith, Mikko Koskinen, no. Calgary, yeah, I would trust Markstrom more than any other goalie I've named so far. But again, Winnipeg, Hellebuck, yes. But the goaltending, if you really look around the league, it's a weak position. And it shouldn't be, because goaltending is like quarterback. If you do not have a good goaltender, you're done. Again, it's rare that you see a goalie that's not elite and you can win a cup. I guess the last example I could really think of, if I really dip into my brain here, other than Matt Murray, because again, he had Fleury playing, so he did not have the burden to have to play every second day, go through that grind of 3 months of just, you're playing every second day, you're traveling, it's a wear and tear on your body. So that was a difference. But other than Matt Murray, going back, like Cam Ward, he was playing at a really high level. He didn't give you subpar goaltending. J.S. Shigeru was elite. Maybe Chris Osgood in 2008 with the Red Wings. But he was really strong as well. So it's rare. I guess my best answer, maybe the 2010 Blackhawks with Niemi, but then again, he was really strong too. So like I said, it's rare that you're going to win a Stanley Cup with subpar goaltending, and maybe the tandem will work. Hasn't been that, again, Matt Murray, Fleury, last tandem to really win a cup. But it wasn't really a tandem because Fleury had made 12 straight starts and they pull him for Matt Murray in game 4 of the conference final, and Murray closed out the season. It wasn't like they're going, game for game. And that's what some teams do on a regular basis. The Islanders have used that system for years when they had Greiss and Varlamov there. They're doing it to an extent now with Sorokin. So just interesting there. Washington, again, an elite team. The Islanders, they lose their captain, Anders Lee. They add Kyle Palmieri, Travis Zajac to their roster at the trade deadline. They can't score goals. It's their problem right now. They've lost in their past 2 games. They have 2 goals. That's not gonna work. And they've scored 8 goals in their last 7 games. Matt Barzal was buzzing in overtime, a lot of fun to watch. But if you don't score on it and you're just, skating up and down the ice, well, how effective was that? You're just skating to skate at that point. You're just doing a skill session with Kendall Coyne Schofield. So, they need Brock Nelson. They need Jordan Eberle, Anthony Beauvillier, Jean-Gabriel Pageau to step up and start scoring. These 2 teams are separated by a point. They play again Saturday night. I expect to see the same goaltenders with Samsonov and Varlamov after really solid starts from both of them. But interesting development for sure. A big game last night. Washington gets the win. And it honestly impressed me to see Washington beat the Islanders in a grinding 1-0 game. You can sometimes see Washington leak. They can give up leads or fall asleep. Last night they did. They played a full game. The Islanders had last change. They had what they wanted, but Washington still found a way to pull out a win in the gimmick. Pittsburgh, they win last night 5-1 over New Jersey. New Jersey's 8th straight loss. They're in a deep pit right now. They become the new Buffalo. Pittsburgh, with the win, they jumped to 63 points, tying themselves with the Islanders. And because of regulation wins, they are now second in the East Division. And as ugly as it is for New Jersey, Pittsburgh's gone through their struggles this season, but they're finding a way to win. And they got a good spurt right now where they play New Jersey 3 times this week. That's perfect on your schedule. Boston's got the same thing playing Buffalo. You need to take advantage of those matchups, especially late in the season where points are at a premium. You got Pittsburgh Islanders fighting for position. And Pittsburgh obviously just a point behind Washington. So it's a dogfight. Crosby's found his game. He's got 19 goals now in the year. Brian Rust having a career year. Kapanen starting to find the back of the net. And their depth forwards have been providing good insurance as well. Tanev, Teddy Bluger is a guy that can produce. Even Mike Matheson in the back end. It hasn't turned out to be a terrible trade. Hornquist has been a really good find in Florida, but Matheson has provided some good offense and some solid play as well on the defensive end. Boston, they continue their hot streak. They get a 5-1 win over Buffalo. They finished their 3-game set with Buffalo tonight, obviously hoping for another win. They are at 60 points, so that they're 4 points behind Washington, 3 points behind Pittsburgh and the Islanders, but they have 2 games in hand on everybody in the division. And it's interesting because Boston was, kind of in a rut. Looked like Philly could press them. The Rangers have lost 2 in a row, and now Boston's up by 8 points on the Rangers. So it looks like these 4 teams are going to be the playoff teams. I didn't think the Islanders would make the playoffs, but they're going to. I thought Philly would, but you got Philly as a huge disappointment. The Rangers, again, last year they would not have made the playoffs without the bubble. They would have gotten close, but they get close again. They get some good learning experience, but you look at the Boston Bruins right now. I mean, David Pastrnak, incredible player. I mean, everybody knows that. But he only played 13 minutes and 48 seconds last night, had a goal and assist, and was a +3. That's what you call being productive. He didn't have to be out there the whole night. They know they're playing again tonight, so you get him back to back. You get him some rest, and he still goes out and chews them up. Brad Marchand's playing at an MVP type level right now. I mentioned the other day, Matthews and McDavid are going to be nominated for the award. No doubt. They deserve to. But there's a third person on the ballot, and I think Brad Marchand should be that person. He's carried the Bruins this year where, honestly, the rest of the team couldn't score. We're starting to see Boston produce. We got Craig Smith, Taylor Hall, Krejci's found his game, getting his 6th goal of the season last night. Corrali, on the back end, McAvoy's been productive, but they've gone spurts where they can't score. The whole year, Marchand's been their engine. He's been their best player. And you could maybe push for a Nathan McKinnon to get that third vote. You know, I read somewhere Mitch Marner should be not, which is you need to get two Leafs on the ballot. I don't know. Nominate him for another award, but Marchand, I find it hard to believe that you can vote for an MVP of the league, and who's the most valuable player to his league, but you have two guys on the same team on it. Then neither of them should win it. If that's what happens, and they're Matthews and Marner are both on the ballot, that should disqualify both of them. So he's more valuable than him. Well, it makes no sense. But again, that's probably The Athletic writing that piece. But I think Marchand is a guy that would be right up there. Mark Stone is another candidate for me. Nathan McKinnon, like I mentioned, as that third ballot guy. But you find no fault if you put Marchand up there. But again, Boston, they're playing Buffalo again tonight, finishing up their series. Pittsburgh wraps up their series against New Jersey tomorrow afternoon. So they're playing they're playing the worst teams in the division. Need to take advantage. Both teams have done it so far. And like I said, it's a 4-point gap from 4th to 1st. So this should be a lot of fun down the stretch. But I know personally I want to see Washington play Boston. That'd be fun. With Wilson and those running around, I want that series desperately. That pivot to the Canadian division. Every time it seems to get interesting, Toronto finds their game. They've been going through a spurt lately where they had lost 5 in a row. You heard Sheldon Keefe say, it's not the team playing bad, only the goaltending, which I agree with to a certain extent. Clearly, Riddick was terrible on Tuesday night. Jack Campbell, again, Sunday, I touched on it, let the same goal go by him twice. Just, you got to make that save. So that was inexcusable. But I don't necessarily, I agree in a sense that the goaltending's been bad, but the team hadn't been playing well either. Looking at just a few of their big holes lately, Jake Muzzin and Justin Hall haven't been a good defensive pair. They remind me of Ben Sherratt and Shea Weber in Montreal, where that pair looks slow. They look lethargic. Again, I didn't think Muzzin had a very good game last night. He was caught on the ice a lot against the third line, the Winnipeg Jets, which, I heard Jeff Merrick say it, but I said it about 5 minutes before that, and you've heard me say it here before. The Winnipeg Jets have the best third line in hockey. It's not even close. Andrew Kopp, who's got 21 points in his last 22 games as a quote-unquote depth forward. Adam Lowry, human horse, moving down the wing. And Mason Appleton, who's a Swiss Army knife, who can score, he can defend, he can do whatever the hell you want him to do, and he can shut down the best players. But Toronto gets a big win last night. Credit to them. Wacky first period where Hellebuck lets in 3 goals and 6 shots. He's chased. Just an off night for him. That Matthews goal can't go in. Again, the Spezza tip in was a little unlucky for him, but I thought the first 2 goals, both savable pucks. Campbell was okay. He beats Winnipeg last night. They're playing a good team. It doesn't make me any more confident that he's a starting goalie come playoff time. To me, it's still an open audition. They gotta hope Freddie can come back before the end of the season. They get him a few games. Now, if Freddie gets to the starter's net when he comes back, that does not guarantee that he's going to be the starter. It shouldn't, because prior to his injury, Frederik Andersen was average to below average. He was not playing well. And who can really say when his injury started? Because whenever a goalie's playing bad, it's an injury. I don't know if you've noticed that. Jack Campbell, he's constantly dinged up. Around the league, a few years ago, Jonathan Quick, when the LA Kings really started to hit the ditch, he's always hurt. Ben Bishop in Dallas, constantly hurt. Always hurt. Something wrong with him. My play's starting, I got to go. We see that in baseball. Pitchers are getting lit up, and they're like, oh, well, I got to go 10-day IL. No, okay. For what? Get a back rub? Do you have Tommy John? No. Okay, get your ass back on the field. You're just not pitching well. Again, same for goaltending. But great night for Marner and Matthews, the two of the three guys that'll be in the Hart Trophy ballot. But Jumbo gets a point, so that was a good little story for him because they thought it was a goal at first. He hasn't scored in 26, but he gets an assist nonetheless. Simmons gets a goal too, so good depth scoring. Simmons, Spezza both scored last night, so they need that depth. They need those veterans to start chipping in before playoff time, and they open up a 6-point gap between them and the Jets. So that's obviously a positive for Toronto. They play again Saturday night, which is still a big game. I think Toronto wins in regulation Saturday night. The division's on ice. Winnipeg still has a game in hand on them, but with Toronto's got a lot of Ottawa down the stretch. I still think they play Vancouver 2 or 3 more times. So they should be able to win some of those games quite easily. And Winnipeg plays Edmonton a few more times, so they've had trouble with this year. They got Montreal a few times down the stretch. So they got a tougher schedule. So I think Winnipeg, if they want to have a chance at making it interesting for first in the Canadian division, they need to win Saturday night. But for Winnipeg, Hellebuck had a bad night. Adam Lowry left the game, which is obviously concerning. The guy's a stud, so they need him back. Blake Wheeler just returned from a concussion. But I talked about at the deadline that I think Toronto is better right now than Winnipeg because Winnipeg did not add to their defense. Toronto, whose defense is obviously imperfect, is better than the Winnipeg Jets because I think Pionk and Morrissey are good, but Riley and Brody, you could almost, I think Pionk and Morrissey are a tad bit better than that pair because I think Pionk's at a higher level than even Morgan Riley. But it's similar. Then you look down, well, you got Tucker Poolman and Hinola on the defensive pair. Muzzin and Hall normally are solid, but Sandin again, they're playing him with Dermott out or Bogosian out, but I don't see a fit there yet. Again, it doesn't hurt to audition him, but I don't see him ready for playoffs. And what'll be interesting to see too is Nick Robertson. He was healthy last night. If he plays one more game this year, then his entry-level contract will kick in, meaning that 1 year of his pro deal will be removed this year. So that's an interesting decision from management because it means he's 2 years away from restricted free agency and money, and it's all a business. So I don't think he's ready for the NHL anyway. So if I was the general manager, I think it makes sense on two fronts to not play him because he's not good enough to play NHL minutes, and also you get to keep his contract. So if I'm Kyle Dubas, Nick, when the Marlies are allowed to play again because of COVID in Ontario, Nick Robertson's playing there for the rest of the year. You get into the playoffs, get some experience, but he's not playing another game for the Toronto Maple Leafs this year. If it's me, because I just don't think he's ready, and I don't think he's nothing. Again, he's a 19, 20-year-old kid. He's not NHL ready. But teams love to play their youngsters. Again, Cole Caulfield would be playing for the Montreal Canadiens right now if they didn't have such a cap problem. So it's all a balancing act when it comes to playing your younger players because fans are going to be clamoring for it, regardless. Speaking of Montreal, they got a couple key games this weekend. They have a 7-point lead on the Calgary Flames with a game in hand, but they play Calgary tonight and tomorrow. Carey Price will not be available for either game. He's got concussion-like symptoms, so he's out for at least a week. So likely a double dose of Jake Allen. He's been solid. They got a win against Edmonton Wednesday night. The big thing for Montreal is to watch is, are they going to start on time? It's the key thing. We haven't seen that often enough. And secondly, can they get some goal scoring? For Montreal, if they didn't add Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, and Jake Allen to their team this year, I don't know. They would be such a terrible team. If you look at the guys on their team that have underperformed, Gallagher, Tatar, Philippe Danault, Drouin has not scored in 30 games. Shea Weber has been underwhelming. You've had injuries. Carey Price has been god-awful. Romanov, I think, has been a pretty good story. Kulak, whatever. But you just look at their forward group. Kotkaniemi has not had that same burst that we've seen in the bubble. Atari Lehkonen, Corey Perry's been a good story, but a lot of their guys that you'd say, okay, these are the guys that we expect to do big things. They haven't. Thank God for Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, and Jake Allen, who are all 3 free agent ads. Josh Anderson being, the stud that he is, Tyler Toffoli being a 20-goal scorer, and Jake Allen being an elite backup goaltender where Carey Price has dealt with injuries and inconsistencies. So they can still get into the playoffs. I think with 2 wins this weekend, it'll lock it up against Vancouver. Lost to Ottawa last night. They had won 2 straight, but they have some games in hand, but they're going to be playing a lot of hockey. They don't have a very good team to begin with, so they're out of it. So Calgary can make it interesting this weekend, or Montreal can just close the door and focus in on getting that 4 seed, likely playing Toronto in the first round and trying to prepare for that matchup with as much health as they can get. Central Division is a lot like the East because it's tight. You got Carolina, Tampa, Florida, all at the top of the division, still fighting for playoff position. I think it'll come down to the wire here. Carolina beats Florida last night. That's a big reason Florida is in second place because they just haven't been able to beat Carolina this year. Carolina has their number. Niederreiter has 8 points in 5 games. Trocheck has 7 points in 5 games against his former team. Aho had a pair of goals last night with Martin Neckash assisting both of them. And Bobrovsky played well. But looking at Carolina, what's interesting to me, as we talk about goaltending before, they have 3 different options. James Reimer, Optimus Rhyme, Peter Mrazek, and Alex Nedeljkovic. And Nedeljkovic was a high second-round pick for Carolina. He's an American goaltender, playing U.S. National Development Program, playing college hockey, looking like a really solid player. And he's turning into a star. He made a key save last night on Jonathan Huberdeau late in the game to keep them up by 1. Then, seconds later, Aho gets an empty netter. But it just shows you what they have. I think they have so much depth in net that they've been really rotating the 3 right now. But Mrazek's played some playoff experience, but it wouldn't shock me if Alex Nedeljkovic is their answer in net. He's there for sure. I got 4 shutouts on the year. He looks like a really solid goaltender. And for a while, I think they were looking at him in Charlotte saying, this guy's not developing. He's still young. It takes time for goaltenders, and they may have an answer longer term. Obviously, I think James Reimer will be out of Carolina after this year. It'll be Mrazek and Nedeljkovic moving forward. But in a few years, you could be hearing the Alex Nedeljkovic being a goaltender to really keep your eye on because the guy's athletic. He's a battler in the net. He makes big saves in key moments. And for Carolina, they sit first in this division with 67 points and 46 games played. And a lot of that has to do with just their goaltending and their strong defense. Brett Pesce, Slavin, Dougie Hamilton, Jake Gardner to an extent. They got those three defensemen I just named are all really strong. They got strong defensive forwards in Jordan Martinook. Jordan Stahl is having a bounce back year. They know how to play the game defensively. And the team just buys in to Rob Brendamore's system. And it's been a really consistent team for the past number of years, and it looks like they're going to be a threat again. Florida's in second. They played 2 more games in Carolina. They're at 65 points. And Tampa, they get a win over Columbus last night. They have played 47 games. They have 64 points. So they're right behind Florida. But like I said, it's a dogfight. You got Stamkos out for Tampa right now. They do get a win with a backup goaltender, McElhaney, last night against Columbus, who's just been struggling. Blake Coleman gets a couple goals, but starting to see David Savard get implemented in the defense score. He's playing with Ryan McDonough last night. He played with Hedman for a few games. but he's playing over 25 minutes a night as a member of the Tampa Bay Lightning. You got Hedman, you got Savard, you got Sergachev, Chernak. They got McDonough. They got a plethora of defensemen that can play big minutes. And for Tampa, I don't think they're concerned with where they finish in the standings because they're just a team that's confident. Would they like to play a Nashville or a Dallas more? I'm sure. But if they do have to play Florida in that first round, I'm sure they're comfortable with that matchup. And, they're not afraid of a little bit of competition. They had to play Columbus in the first round of the playoffs last year. Columbus had swept them the year before. They had to get over that hump. And, they win their game 1 against Columbus in 5 overtimes. So they had to battle to get through that. So I think we have to remember that and really think of what Tampa did to push through, and facing a Florida team with the Stanley Cup pedigree that Tampa has won't worry them a bit, but they still look like a good team. They get good goaltending, they got great defense, waiting on some forwards to get going, but they still have some good depth. And Ross Colton, Yandy Gord looks like a player who keeps getting better year over year. So they're strong, but these 3 teams at the top are all dangerous. Now below them, it's another 3-way dogfight. As of right now, Nashville's in a playoff spot. They played 48 games. They have 52 points, and they're in a playoff spot. But Dallas lost last night. They've been on a tear. They lose to Detroit after winning the previous 2. They play 4 times this week, but they lose to Detroit 7-3 last night after Jakub Vrana, their newest addition, has a 4-goal game for the Wings. They played 2 less games in Nashville, and they're 2 points back, so they're right on their heels. And then there's Chicago looked out of it, but then Nashville went through a tough spurt, and Chicago's back in it. And the big interesting thing is Nashville plays Chicago tonight, and they've played twice this week. Nashville is 6-0-1 against Chicago this year, which is just heartbreaking for the Blackhawks. If you miss the playoffs and you just look at your record, it's going to be because you can't beat Nashville. They had their first win against Nashville the other night. They were down 4-1 in the third period, and they rallied to come back and win. Vinny Hinostroza, Brandon Hagel, who's really a depth forward, had 3 points in the game. He was a big part of the comeback. So Chicago needs a regulation win tonight against Nashville. Their eighth meeting of the season. They've only won 1. And with a win in regulation tonight, that would put them a point back of Nashville with a game in hand. It also helped Dallas because obviously they're right on their heels, but it's another race down the stretch. You got Chicago with Duncan Keith and Patrick Kane. This team's not going to quit. They didn't sell off too many players at the trade deadline. They kept Nikita Zadorov. They kept some other guys they potentially could have moved. And it looks like they want to be a team that compete for a playoff spot. Nashville did the same thing. They didn't sell off their assets. Dallas really didn't have much to sell off, but they have a team that made it to a Stanley Cup final last year. They're without Ben Bishop. They're without Radulov. Tyler Seguin has not played a game this year. We've seen Jason Robertson. Joe Pavelski he got his 20th goal of the season last night. They have a room full of guys that have a lot of pride. Even Esa Lindell and Heiskanen. You get a taste of the playoffs. You got a taste of the Stanley Cup final. This team is going to give up. So huge game tonight. And this division, again, you got a top 3, which are real close in standings, and the bottom 3 are fighting for that last playoff spot. And yeah, you could be for nothing, you'd say, because they're going to get beat by Carolina or Tampa, but you want to get in the playoffs and see what you can do. Once you're in, anything can happen. We've seen that with the Los Angeles Kings winning the Stanley Cup in 2012, being the 8th seed. Finally, the Western Division. It's been a week since we saw the Colorado Avalanche hit the ice. They had some COVID issues pop up. They're supposed to play last Wednesday. Game got postponed, and they were canceled all hockey activities until Tuesday when they got back on the ice, and they played their first game back last night. Colorado beat the St. Louis Blues, who hadn't played in a while either, because they were scheduled to play Colorado last week. But they come back. Colorado, Nathan McKinnon has a 3-point night. Andre Burakovsky gets a couple goals. They're still without Philip Grubauer because he did test positive for COVID. But you get Devin Dubnyk, you got Jonas Johansson in net, and they're still solid. They get a win. They're now 2 points behind Vegas, but they do have 2 games in hand on them. But 2 games in hand is only valuable if you win them, like I said before. And Vegas, since Colorado's been out, they've gone on a tear. They've won 7 in a row. playing a lot of San Jose and lower level teams in there, but they're playing at a high level right now. They look like a strong team. And what I want more than anything, and it's going to happen eventually, but these two teams are going to meet in the second round, and I can't wait for it. I think it's the strongest second round matchup because, Winnipeg, Toronto will be good, but I don't think that'll be as strong. If it's Washington, the Islanders, the one maybe could make a push on is Tampa, Carolina. That matchup will be strong if the two finish, if they do make it to the second round, because I think both teams are Stanley Cup competitors. But you look at Vegas, you look at Colorado, this is a conference final matchup. But this year with COVID, with the divisions, these two teams are going to meet before that. And it's strong what these two teams are built like. You got Colorado, who's got a mix of just high-end skill, but with some grit, with the likes of Kadri and Pierre-Edouard Bellemare and even Carl Soderberg to an extent. But you got like a depth forward like Andre Burakovsky and Jonas Donskoy that can chip in offensively, and obviously a superstar Nathan MacKinnon. Then you have Vegas, who may have the best team, the best built team in the NHL. You got Mark Stone and Marchessault, Riley Smith, Pietrangelo, Shea Theodore, a double dose of Leonard and Marc-Andre Fleury in net. There's just no weaknesses to these teams. But somebody's going to lose in the second round. And I think it'll be a war. It's going to be chippy. You're going to see, I'm interested to see how Vegas defends Nathan MacKinnon. When you get the last change, is it Pietrangelo and Theodore? Are they a defensive pair playing against MacKinnon, Rantanen, and Landeskog? What do you do to defend it? What line goes up against MacKinnon? Is it the Mark Stone line, who I consider one of the best defensive forwards in the NHL, likely to win the Selke Trophy, maybe nominated for the Hart? He's having that good of a season. That's intriguing to me. So these two teams are incredible. Again, you got Minnesota, who's in the third spot, who is a great story. Dean Evison, definitely a candidate for Coach of the Year. Minnesota, they're going to finish ahead of St. Louis easily. And they just run off wins. Kaprizov's been great. Cam Talbot, they signed him as a free agent. He's playing fantastic. Brian Suter has found his game again. It looks like people are excited to play in Minnesota. It was lethargic for a while. Marcus Foligno, again, you got Joel Eriksson Ek, who's having his best year as a pro. But they're a distant third. Now, do I think Minnesota? I think Minnesota wants Vegas in that first round, because I think they think they can give them a run for their money. The way Minnesota plays, I think they think they can beat them. Do I think so? No. You got some horses, you got good defense, and with good goaltending, you never know. And then there's St. Louis and Arizona battling out at the bottom of the division. Again, neither team wants to get that fourth spot because St. Louis has games in hand up the wazoo, but they've been able to win. Arizona's been losing to porous teams. They lose to Minnesota twice this week, which is tough for them to not even get a point in those games. St. Louis has Colorado again on Saturday afternoon, so that's another tough matchup, but we'll see what they can bring to the table. But somebody's going to get that fourth spot, likely they're going to play Colorado or Vegas. That's not going to be fun. And if it's St. Louis, you get your teeth kicked in. Is there changes? Does Craig Berube come back? Because that would be a disappointing season. Yeah, you look at the division, say there's 3 top teams. But for them to finish fourth, put up no fight in the playoffs, Doug Armstrong's a guy who wants to win. And I think he would think long and hard about potentially changing up his plans, changing up a head coach, or definitely, I think of a guy like Vladimir Tarasenko, if you cannot unload that contract, it won't be there come next season. Jaden Schwartz, another contract. He only scored a 6th goal of the season last night. He's an injury-prone guy. Can you get rid of that contract? He'll be gone. So, interesting developments across the league. That's really the division breakdown right now. A lot of moving parts. We got Montreal, Calgary tonight, Boston, Buffalo, Minnesota's in LA. So not many games tonight. We got some afternoon ones tomorrow, but I'll touch on that tomorrow. Big UFC pay-per-view tomorrow night. Before we wrap today, I want to talk about the series in baseball right now, and it's so intriguing. And for one big reason for me, hatred. There's no hatred in sports anymore. You know, when I was growing up, obviously my parents are Leafs fans, so you had to watch the games a lot. It used to be a Friday, Saturday series, home and home between Buffalo and Toronto. And you'd see they play in Buffalo Friday night. And when Ty Domi was playing and Rob Ray, they'd fight every one of those nights. But even if there's not fighting back in the day, it was physical. There was slashes. There was scrums after the whistle. Even the skill players would get involved with that. You'd see some hatred. I think of the 04 Red Sox against the 04 Yankees. When the Yankees were up 3-0, the Sox came back, won, then won the World Series. There's hatred. They hated Alex Rodriguez. The Yankees hated Pedro Martinez. Dustin Pedroia was not a well-liked guy. It was, people were getting thrown at, but there was real hatred there. The San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers have hatred. I watched the game last Saturday night. I was going to go to bed. I couldn't. Clayton Kershaw, who's the most mild-mannered guy, you know, he's kind of reminds me of Tom Brady because he's like golly gee whiz and you know, kind of a lanky frame, just a great pitcher. He was getting fired up over a call. Then you had guys chirping him down the third baseline. He gets in the face of the catcher. Guys are yelling at him. I love it. Drama, intrigue. Drama creates intrigue, and we see that. The Dodgers hate Fernando Tatis Jr., who's a blooming star, because he plays different. He's got some charismatic to him. He's an interesting cat. He's a different cat. They don't like that. And then you got guys like on the Dodgers, Trevor Bauer, who's a great starting pitcher, but he's a different guy. He talks a lot. They don't love it. Manny Machado, when he makes a play at third and he's playing against the Dodgers, he puts an extra spin on that baseball, and we see it. They're running the bases and these guys are jawing at one another. It's just refreshing. I think of this NHL season. Has there been that much hatred? Before the season, all we were promised was, well, they're going to play each other 8-9 times. We're going to see rivalries out the wazoo. Ooh. Well, just using Canada, because I like to pile on us the division, because this, I don't even what you call it, project or trial, has been a failure. That's how I see it. I don't know how ratings are, but I'm just thinking as a sports fan, if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, you're used to seeing no passion, because that's just, and I'm not saying you don't want to win. I'm not saying that, but I'm not saying you got to have fighting, but just throw a check. Seem engaged. Have a scrum, something. Zach Hyman gets his knee taken out the other night. The guys are sipping champagne on the bench. Nobody does anything. The guys on the ice just like, oh, well, whatever. Come on. Dodgers, Padres is going to have some anger, some frustration. Padres win game 1 last night. They have a 4-game set this weekend. Padres take game 1 with a late ERA, late RBI in the 8th. Dodgers took 2 or 3 last weekend. The Padres are looking for vengeance this weekend. They play Sunday night baseball with an early 8 o'clock start. So afternoon game in San Diego. I love it. I want these games should all be televised, because this is a rivalry baseball should be promoting. Again, you have one of your biggest stars in Tatis. You got Clayton Kershaw, one of the best pitchers to ever play the game. And it's a real rivalry. It's not fabricated by the media to say, well, these two teams really don't like each other. Well, Toronto Maple Leafs, the Montreal Canadiens, the Montreal Canadiens, Ottawa Senators, they have a history. Yeah. 15 years ago when it was like the Battle of Ontario is a joke. It's not a rivalry. It doesn't help that Ottawa's in transition, but also because who's got any bite on either of those teams? There's no rivalry, but there's hatred here in this series, and I love it. I love it because it's just old school. It's what sometimes it's just what gets the TV on. It's just saying, okay, tonight, yeah, you don't need, again, it's not about fighting. It's not about anything, but maybe they're going to throw it behind Tatis. maybe he makes a play in center and he does a little show after it. And then the next at bat, they kind of little sweet chin music or something, or there's always something. And these two teams are two of the best teams in baseball, and it doesn't hurt the fact they're in the same division and they hate one another. I love it. Can't wait to watch it this weekend. But that's just something to look forward to. There's lots of action, lots of different events this weekend. We got UFC 261 with featuring Kamaru Usman, Jorge Masvidal, and their rematch for the World Welterweight Championship. A lot of hockey. Anthony Davis returned to the hardwood last night for the Los Angeles Lakers in a loss to the Mavericks. They'll play each other again tomorrow night and Saturday night primetime. But I'll be back tomorrow morning, talk about some other sports news, get into that UFC pay-per-view featuring 3 title fights, talk about some more baseball, including the Dodgers game. Blue Jays are back in action tonight playing the Tampa Bay Rays, including some other interesting stories in baseball, some surprising stories like the 12-7 San Francisco Giants, who continue to find a way to win, even with a depleted roster. So we'll talk about all that. Again, everybody who's listened to my Doug MacLean interview, thank you so much. Anybody who hasn't, check it out. It was a lot of fun, and I think you'll enjoy it. So until next time, everybody, take care, enjoy the snow, and we'll talk soon.